Morning, everyone. We're just going to let a few more people jump on before we get started. Okay. All right, looks like we've got most people on now, so we'll jump straight into it. So hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name's Hannah, and I'm the Product and Education Administrator in the Allied Medical Marketing team. We're so pleased to have Kathleen Simpson from Bodypoint back with us again for the second webinar. Today's session is on anterior supports and follows on from last week's session on pelvic positioning. If you missed our first webinar and don't have access to the recording, please email us on marketing@alliedmedical.co.nz and we can send you a link to view this on your own time. Before I hand over to Kathleen, can I please ask that you all type your full name into the comments box, just so we have a who is on here today, especially if you are sharing screens. I also just wanted to let you know, as with the first session, we will be sending out an email with a copy of today's presentation, along with the links to all the videos for your reference. So if you miss anything in the presentation, you don't need to worry. We'll send that out to you in the next few days. We should also have plenty of time at the end for a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, you can either ask it at the end or feel free to type into the comments box, and I can collate these throughout the presentation. You can also chat to one of our technical product specialists or our customer care team if you have any questions too that come to you after the session. So thank you, Kathleen. I'll hand over to you.
Well, thank you, Hannah, and I appreciate everyone here. I am speaking to you from Seattle, and if you didn't listen to the previous presentation, I'll just say that Bodypoint is located in Seattle, and so I'm a day behind you here, but through the miracle of the internet, here we are. Bodypoint is 30 years old this year, and we make postural supports, and that we are dedicated to that. So you'll see that we pay a lot of attention to secondary postural supports, and I'm going to go ahead and share screen and bring up the presentation. There we go. So basically the agenda today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the products I'm going to discuss, the anterior supports, but just briefly in the beginning. So then we'll talk about really the clinical approaches to the use of these products and which ones you use for different clinical presentations for postural support. Then look at sizing, and I will end with a decision tree that I hope will be a helpful tool when approaching what harness to choose for a specific client. So starting with the Bodypoint product line for harnesses, our 4-point anterior harnesses include the Pivot Fit, the Stay Flex, and the Trimline sort of backpack style harness. And essentially the Pivot Fit, it comes in two different styles. One is a dynamic style, so it stretches it this way and this way, giving you a little bit of dynamic room here in the shoulder to lean forward. This is also true of the Stay Flex. Now, these are not straight neoprene harnesses. They have a lamination, and this lamination has an end range to the stretch. So if you take a neoprene harness, butterfly style harness like this, and stretch it, when you first put it on the client, it looks great, but neoprene can stretch and stretch and overstretch. And so particularly if the client has a lot of tone, then very shortly that harness is not holding the way it should. Bodypoint, since we know the end range of the lamination, we calculate the stitch length. So when it's being pulled, we've got the stitch length to the end range of the stretch. So you're never going to have a situation of the stitching popping out. So it should hold up very well. And again, with the Stay Flex, the dynamic portion runs horizontally in this portion of the strap and horizontally here in this lower panel. The trimline harness, it's a static harness, does not have a dynamic component to it. The pivot fit you can get either as dynamic or static. The pivot fit I like, it was kind of like an A-style harness, but it has more contour and more surface area, and which is very nice. But the really distinct difference of the pivot fit is this swivel buckle here in the middle, and that allows, whenever I look at someone who presents with an asymmetry and needs anterior support, I immediately think of the pivot fit because it's going to immediately adjust for that asymmetrical fitting. The Stay Flex can come in a narrow version that works well for women going between the breasts. It can also, it has an option with a zipper. And the trimline, as I say, is a static harness. Sometimes people, instead of needing it both shoulders with a powerful shoulder retention, sometimes they just need it for one side. Perhaps you have someone with a stroke or one-sided the lack of tone and need just one side retracted. And you can obviously use the backpack harness that way and just using one side of the harness. We also have chest belts, and this is just a non-padded chest belt. It has this thumb loop here. It is and has hook and loop, or the Velcro that holds it in place. You can also buy an option of a slip-on pad for it. It's a simple or rather basic chest harness. The Monoflex, this comes, you can get it either in a swivel buckle version here in the two-piece version, or there's a one-piece version. And then we have the universal elastic straps. These universal elastic straps, these are neoprene, and they do stretch a lot, but they're designed for temporary use, and they have a very powerful hook and loop. So you can wrap it around and take it off and on as needed. So what's the role of an anterior trunk support? Essentially, what we're, a good anterior trunk support is going to impact the position of the head, the upper extremities. And you're trying to correct postural alignment. So good posture, really, this will support function and comfort. And it should, increase the capability of participation in activities. You can actually minimize some of the development of skeletal asymmetry, and we'll show you how to do that. You can improve pressure distribution, which is akin to comfort, and normalize muscle tone and a reduction of spasticity and tone. Basically, we're aiming for this ideal neutral posture that you see here in the image, and you've got a neutral spine with the scapula resting against the back of the chair. It's positioned a little bit posterior to the pelvis. You notice that you have a chair that allows for a little bit of an open back to seat ratio. The chair itself, if you look at it, the length the seat is correct, so there's a comfortable placement for the knees. The foot plates are at the right place. We've started with a pelvic belt. You always start with the pelvic belt before you start thinking of anterior support. So the head is in a neutral position. The eye gaze is good. This is what we ideally are striving for. You can't always achieve this, but this is what we're trying to achieve, with the shoulders being level and the pelvis neutral as well. So if we first think about the primary support surfaces, what are we looking for? You want to make sure that the user's in the right seat, the right chair. That means it's the right size. It's not too wide so that they have adequate lateral support. The seat to back angle is not too tight so that it's opened enough. There's lateral supports if that's needed. The arm height for the armrests is correct. It's not too high, hunching. The shoulders are too low, not providing adequate support. And the whole seating system is working together. You've got the right cushion for the user, the right back, the right height of back. So we're going to assume that we have all these primary surfaces are correct for the user. And then if you still have a situation where they need some anterior support, then you start looking at the postural supports that we'll talk about further. So again, as I mentioned, you ideally want the upper part, the scapula, the back, behind the pelvis, a little bit behind. That's going to allow for a more comfortable and neutral posture. What are the goals? We talked a little bit about this, but I never think of belts or harnesses as restraints. They should be exactly the opposite. They should be supporting the user so that they're more functional and they're able to do more things. So if it helps to increase or perform functional tasks, that's what we're striving for. So if somebody has a downward gaze and we're using a harness to help them have an adequate gaze, that's important for their function. They may use their chin to drive their chair. They need to have a nice, their anterior, they may need an anterior support to help secure that, keep them stable so they're better able to drive their chair, or use an eye gaze technology, or there's many different functional tasks that we're looking at. If the user, if their deformity is flexible, then we can use postural supports to improve the symmetry and the anatomical alignment of the upper body over the pelvis. So we may be trying to correct or accommodate kyphotic postures, lordosis, obliquity, and rotational postures. Again, we would expect that there's been a clinical evaluation of this user. We know if we put them on the mat, they lie flat, are they flexible, are they fixed? Oftentimes when we think of fixed postures, somebody's not 100% fixed. We might be able to have a little bit of correction there. And if that's true, then we can help prevent further spinal and subsequent pelvic deformities. Or if they're flexible, we can be quite aggressive with our postural supports and keep those deformities from becoming fixed. If someone has a kyphotic posture, then they're likely to have poor respiration. We want to be able to increase respiratory capacity and volume, head control, maintaining a good visual field. Also, it will help improve speech and hearing. It's also very important for being able to eat and drink. It's also important to have a good distribution of comfort. If you have someone with extreme obliquity and one hip higher than the other, that means the hip that's lower, the tissue underneath that they're sitting on is particularly vulnerable for pressure sores. So we're trying always to improve pressure distribution through the seating, trying to get that neutral seating posture. And another goal might be to improve balance or reduce the risk of falling. So as I mentioned, and we'll talk a lot about this fixed posture versus flexible, many of the postural supports can accommodate a structural deformity that's fixed. If it's flexible, we're going to try to pull things back. We're going to try to create alignment. And essentially, wherever we can, we want to have gravity working with us. So this frame here is showing a seat to back angle of 90 degrees. That's going to push the user forward rather than having a little more of an open back angle here to make gravity work with us. And very, very, very important, whenever you're using an anterior trunk support, always there should be a pelvic support. There should be a lap belt. The reason for this is that if someone is not securely, if their pelvis is not secure and they can drift into a posterior pelvic tilt and start sliding out of the chair, the harness can become a choking hazard. There are documented cases of this, and the postural support belt can eliminate that risk. Everything I'm talking about here is a general guidance. Obviously, when you're dealing with a client, you can see them in person and you can get your hands on them and work with them. You can see more than these are just, general recommendations, but that's what we can do here today. So if I look at a client and I see they're presenting with scoliosis, which is often accompanied with obliquity and rotation as well. So that C or that S curve usually comes with pelvic obliquity. So you've got one hip here that's higher than the other. Well, typically the opposite shoulder then is going to be higher. And when that shoulder is higher, then the head and the neck are usually cranked this way to help try to maintain a visual field that's not cockeyed. So when you see the client in this kind of picture, this kind of posture, then we want to think about whether or not they're flexible or not. Obviously, the shoulders are not level. Typically, there's low tone in the trunk, which is increasing this asymmetrical muscle tone. And there's just reduced upper body extremity, upper body function and your upper body extremities as well. Common seating system factors, so we're going back to the primary surfaces here, include an inadequate postural support to prevent the postural collapse. So again, we talked about seat to back angle, but maybe the back isn't high enough. Maybe it's too low. Maybe there needs to be lateral supports. So they're just looking at anything that can contribute to an uneven seating surface. Maybe you need a different kind of cushion that's providing more support. Is the chair too wide? I see chairs that are too wide way too often, and I wish I didn't see this, because something as simple as the chair being too wide and somebody not having good lateral stability can certainly contribute to the scoliosis and the obliquity and rotation. The other thing again is if there's adequate, are the armrests too low? If they're too low, then again this can be a contributing factor. So we're just looking at all of these different factors. Then with the anterior trunk support, in conjunction with the primary surfaces being correct for the user and the pelvis being secured by the pelvic belt, you can use that pelvic belt, as we mentioned in the previous presentation, to help de-rotate the obliquity and just pushing that down and back if you have a flexible deformity. And then you can help correct the shoulder, just pulling this obliquity and rotation of the hip down into a more neutral alignment. Oftentimes the shoulders start to self-correct themselves, again depending if you're fixed or flexible. If indeed it's a fixed deformity and you can only correct a little bit or just keep the person from getting the deformity from getting worse, this is a good goal with postural supports as well. Looking at the trunk scoliosis and obliquity and rotation again. If you have someone who's fixed, you may only be able to accommodate the belt. Last time we talked about if you have one hip that's higher than the other, we recommend using the pelvic belt at a 45-degree attachment to help pull the hip down. The other side probably at about 70 degrees or if this is a fixed deformity, you can still use this arrangement, and this will help accommodate that higher hip as well. In the case of improving the posture, the trim line can be very, very effective. Again, depending upon flexibility or not, but if the trim line can help hold the user in more of a neutral position. The trim line, however, this is a very aggressive harness for this case. So using this most likely with a flexible posture, then, and I really like using this with children. If they're still flexible, and that's when I tend to get more aggressive and try to keep them from developing these deformities. And the trim line can be very, very effective with this. So essentially, if you're trying to, if the posture is fixed, you can get one side attaching it tighter or looser. And what I mean by that is perhaps this part of the trim line harness in the back is a little bit lower, so it allows a little give here. This one may be attached higher so that it's a little more restrictive. Again, working with the user, it can become more obvious how you might want to use these harnesses. Thinking about kyphosis and trunk instability, this classic sort of C-shaped spine here. You have the downward gaze. What commonly happens is people start going into posterior pelvic tilt so that they can get their eyes at more the level that they want. But then if you're sitting in posterior pelvic tilt, well then you're at risk for pressure sores. So the question again becomes, is this a fixed deformity? Is it flexible? If it's flexible, securing the pelvis so that you're no longer in that posterior pelvic tilt, again at about a 70 to 90 degree belt placement here, and then either using there's some different harnesses we'll suggest for correcting the shoulders as well. Again, this can be associated with low muscle tone, low abdominal tone, so there's more trunk instability. So considering that, what can contribute in the primary surfaces to a poor lordotic position? And again, it's the seat to back angle being too close. Inadequate support to help prevent collapse, And the absence of a pelvic block or a good pelvic belt at about 70 to 60, 70 degrees to keep the user from slipping into worse posterior pelvic tilt. So for anterior supports, once you correct for those things, then we look at the anterior supports. We want to extend this trunk as much as possible. They're curved over. So we want to pull this trunk back and allow to improve respiration, to improve digestion, improve the gaze, and also keep the trunk stable against this back surface. Again, we're looking for the scapula to be behind the little bit posterior to the pelvis. So things to think about here. Again, we're going to put the pelvic belt at about 70 degrees, and then you want to improve the stability of the shoulders if it's more exaggerated. If the shoulders are not collapsing, but what you really need is trunk support, sometimes just a good chest support holding the trunk back is sufficient, and the monoflex is excellent for that. I tend to prefer the monoflex that is the one piece rather than the one that opens in the center, just because the monoflex also is a dynamic, has a dynamic capacity as well. So you can get it quite tight, but it's still going to be comfortable because there's a little bit of give to the monoflex, and it holds nicely against the lower rib cage. Now with lordosis, not as commonly seen, but this hyperextension of the spine in the lordotic area here, it's comes part and parcel with an anterior pelvic tilt. So it's not what we typically see, but you remember last week we talked about if you have an anterior pelvic tilt, that's the one time we recommend 45-degree angle. So you're going to pull and secure that pelvis back as far as you can. Again, we have to think about whether we have a fixed or a flexible deformity here. The cervical spine may be, you've got this hyperextension of the back. The neck may be extended as well. So now you may have the view going upward. So and there's just a limited connection of the mid-torso contact with the back. What are the common seating factors, primary seating factors that we need to think about here? Well, always we're back to the seat to back angle being open enough to help accommodate this. You could have a reversed biangular back with inadequate support here in the lumbar region to support or prevent that postural collapse. So basically, too much contouring in the lumbar area as opposed to this needed contour and support at the apex of the start of the lordotic curve. So these are things you're thinking about with your back cushion, your seat cushion. And again, we're going to start with the belt at a 45-degree angle to help hold this pelvis in an anterior pelvic tilt. Try to hold it back in place to help decrease the anterior pelvic tilt. So considering, once again, what I said, whether it's flexible or fixed, it'll let us know how aggressive we can be with the postural supports or how accommodating we need to be with them. So this shows a 4-point belt where we started, again at 45 degrees, pulling this anterior pelvic tilt, pulling it backwards. This secondary strap here is attached in front. Its job is to keep this primary support here in place, so it's not going to hike up. And then look at a 4-point chest system here. StayFlex, I think, is an excellent harness for a lordotic posture. The StayFlex has more surface area in front, so it's really pushing the user back into place. You can also, though, if you don't need as much shoulder support, you could consider the pivot fit as well. And then if the shoulders are not so hunched over, once you correct the anterior support, but what you need is the lower part of the rib cage pulled back, then the monoflex can be quite effective as well. Oops. Another clinical presentation that we see is poor respiration. I think of a friend of mine who has MS and was diagnosed in 2005, and she now is in a power chair, and her only movement is C4 and up. She has, at the end of the day, she gets or later in the afternoon, she gets quite tired and she starts losing her breath, her speech. And, you know, her interstitial muscles here are very weak, and she has low tone in the trunk. And again, later in the day, she starts sort of collapsing on herself. The monoflex pulling in across the lower part of these, you know, the upper part of the abdomen and the lower part of the rib cage, and getting that very, very tight can help her. It's the issue is not breathing in, it's the respiration out. So she can't, she's trying to push her breath out. And again, opening up the seat to back angle, having good primary support surfaces for her is important. But then the goal may be to try to lift up that diaphragm, helping her drive out the air for exhalation. So this is showing the two-piece monoflex. I prefer, especially when we're dealing with trying to assist in better respiration, I prefer this one-piece monoflex. And the thing with my friend, earlier in the day, she doesn't necessarily want to wear the monoflex because she's doing well. But once she starts losing her voice and gets more tired, then she puts the monoflex on. What I find is more effective is if someone who has the issue of poor respiration, if they're using it all day, because she would be less likely to get tired if she was wearing it earlier in the day as well. So fitting and adjusting these postural supports. Essentially, the top strap height with the 4-point anterior harnesses, we're trying to make this as comfortable as possible. And we also work very hard. We have a specified foam that really helps the distribution of forces on the user body, and coming across the shoulder and distributing those forces evenly is what we're interested in. But this can be difficult depending on the back. Sometimes you're stuck with working with a certain back, and then how do we adjust for that so that the harnesses are attached correctly. My favorite position for the shoulder harnesses is when it's attached with this -20-degree angle. The reason is you can see that the padding then at the strap is coming up and enveloping the entire shoulder. And this is very comfortable for the user and creates less stress on the body for the user. You still get good envelopment if you have a 0-degree attachment, and you can, and sometimes you're forced to, depending on the back, go up to as high as 20 degrees, but you notice you don't have as much padding across the entire shoulder. You're getting more of a push rather than this envelopment around the shoulder to hold the whole torso back. The other thing you think about is you want the top straps to be really placed in the middle of the shoulder. You don't want it too close to the neck that this can rub against the neck. You don't want it too close to the deltoid. This can slip off at the shoulders. So ideally, and if you look at the shoulders, we're not, you know, we're not straight. The shoulders have some curve and some shape to them. Ideally, having a strap that is coming across in the middle here and in this indentation and creating this 90-degree angle. This is what we're looking for. I have a little video here that shows you the Bodypoint shoulder strap guides, and this is an alternative for getting really good placement if you can't just attach the shoulder harness easily to the back. Some companies that make backs don't allow you to drill in the back, or you might lose the warranty if you do. So here's a couple options. I'm going to turn this music off so I can speak over this. So here are the strap guides, and they help improve the function and comfort of the harness. We're going to optimize the height and the angle, and to better increase that pressure distribution of the shoulder. So here, that's showing you that 20-degree angle that is my favorite. The strap guides can secure this position. They mount between the neck and the shoulder, and they're going to keep the straps from falling off the shoulders or keep them from rubbing up too close to the neck. They work really well with contoured backs, I might add. So you're trying to match the angle to the slope of the shoulders. So you may attach it at a different place in the back depending upon the angle that you're trying to get. Again, if you have a contoured back, you may need a strap guide because the backs are sloped and it's hard to get the right angle without it. Coming in 2 lengths, and they come with the fasteners. There's also a little spacer that you can get that comes with it. If you need a little extra clearance, sometimes there's this lip on the back, and so that spacer helps to take care of that clearance. Here's where you attach the harness right here and here, depending if you're using front mount or rear, or front pull or rear pull. And you can see that we also have a mounting bracket. This mounting bracket fits into the 2 holes that are usually in backs for headrests, and then that way you can accommodate the strap guides really at any position that you need on the back. There's a couple of different sizes depending on the size of the back. You see a headrest receiver fits in there as well. It does not come with a headrest receiver. The other thing to think about is the lower straps and where you attach them. If you need more security around the top of the, around the lower part of the rib cage, then and just a little tighter fit, then putting it at this point be a little higher on the back. That placement is nice. Typically, I kind of default to position A. but sometimes, again, depending on attachments and where you have the opportunity to attach, you can attach it as low as C. If it's at C, it's not going to envelop as much, but that may be fine for your user depending upon the needs of the user. Bodypoint has a very unique way of sizing shoulder harnesses, and it's based off of anthropomorphic data from a university in Delft in the Netherlands. And what we find is our harnesses, our shoulder harnesses, are designed, if you measure from deltoid to deltoid and that distance, then we have a sizing chart that will show you if it's a extra small. Well, we in the pivot fit we have extra small all the way up to extra large, and then if the measurement is somewhere between what's on the chart, you think about if growth or clothing, weight changes, this kind of thing, to accommodate. One thing for children, please don't order a harness that's too big for the child with the idea that they'll grow into it. It's not like a t-shirt, that they're going to grow into. If the harness doesn't fit them correctly, it's not going to do the job. So it's important to try to get that harness to the closest fitting that you can that's correct for that user and that body type. A couple of years ago, we came out with something that we call the multi-directional harness. Prior to that, all of these shoulder harnesses came in either this front pull or the rear pull. So that means that you place your hand on the shoulder and pull from either right in front of the user to tighten the harness or in the back. It depends. Bodypoint probably sold 70% more rear pulls than front pulls, but sometimes you don't know exactly what would work best for that user until you're there actually attaching the harness and see what would work best. So what's great about the multi-directional straps or multi-directional pull straps is that you don't have to think about ordering front pull, rear pull. You'll be able to configure it to whatever you need. And this video shows you how you do that. So MD series stands for multi-directional. So it comes with the straps just lined up like this. If you're using it as a front pull, you have threaded that end through the 3-bar slide. So it's pretty easy to set up. You're threading it through the 3-bar slide. You use the longer end if you're threading it for a rear pull. My cat has just joined us. He's just come in through the window here. And if you heard a meow. And then based on size, you determine the size that you need. They'll come in either a flat mount or a cinch mount, plastic flat mount or plastic cinch mount. So you do have to choose. That you can use a cam buckle, you would buy that separately, or you can use the grommet attachment as well. So one more quick video just to show you a little more how this works, how to set it up and install it, and then I think that becomes more obvious. Determining whether you want front pull, rear pull, which is best for the user or the caregiver. Attaching it to the 3-bar slide. So depending if you want the front pull attachment, then you use this front one. If you want rear pull, you turn it around and use the long end to attach to the 3-bar slide. Always, always, whenever you're using a 3-bar slide in webbing, you do a locking stitch. You pull it through the last time, the third time through, to give it a locking stitch, whether you're using it on a belt or a harness. It shows the plastic flat mounts, the plastic cinch mounts. The flat mounts, you have to thread like this and think about doing that locking stitch once you put it through the 3-bar slide and then that little triangle. So the flat mount takes a little more, you need to think through it a little bit when you're attaching it. The cinch mount is quite easy. The cinch mount has a little bar in it. We'll show you. It's first going to show you how to attach it to the backrest. If you can screw in, then that's a really easy attachment. Again, not all backrests will allow you to screw in. So this is the cinch mount, and you can see it has this little bar here, and it has these teeth up here. So you thread it underneath the bar and back through, and then these little teeth, the bar itself is knurled. It has some texture to it, so it keeps the webbing from slipping. And it's quite effective. It's very easy to set up. Again, you can also optionally use a cam buckle. Now, cam buckles are very easy to thread through. They don't have that knurled bar. They don't have the teeth, so they don't fit quite as tightly. You can get a little more slippage with a cam buckle, but that's unusual in a shoulder harness. Or you can order the grommeted straps and then just attach them directly to the chair, screwing them in. If you have some extra webbing, you can trim it off with scissors and then just take a lighter to seal the end to keep the webbing from fraying. So basically, you've adjusted strap length. You can position with one hand or the other, with one hand and pull with the other to tighten it, either using it as a front mount or a rear mount. Again, the fit should be snug. It shouldn't be real loose, otherwise the harness isn't really going to do its job. We always recommend you check for skin redness after the initial fit and periodically thereafter to make sure that it is fitted correctly to the client. Now, I have this, we've got this little decision tree that Bart Vanderheiden and Philippe Montfort-Correa, these are the two other clinical educators with Bodypoint. And we know that when we talk about this, it seems like we throw a whole lot at people. So this is a little decision tree, and I'd love to get feedback if you think this is useful. So again, the first step, evaluate and adjust the overall seating systems, the primary supports, assess and stabilize the pelvic position, always get that pelvic belt on, and then if needed, identify the primary structural support issues and choose an anterior trunk support option. Now, we've done that as step 3. Now we take a look at the postural deficit, fixed or flexible. So if it's fixed or flexible, we're going to go down and take a look here. Let's say we have trunk rotation, lateral flexion, and some pelvic obliquity. Going down the decision tree here, is it without tone? If it's without tone, I'm going to go down and take a look. I may use, if the primary focus is trunk rotation, might look at the standard pivot fit rather than the dynamic pivot fit. If the primary focus is retraction, then take a look at and consider the trim line harness. We go back over here though, and we find that the user needs tone management. Then think about, is dynamic seating appropriate? If it is, then consider a dynamic pivot fit. If you think that they need more stability than that, then you get down and take a look at the standard pivot fit. Again, when I think about rotations and asymmetry, I always think about the pivot fit first. Then going down here, We have trunk flexion or kyphosis. Going down the decision tree, is there uncontrolled flexion? Do we need more support at the thorax? Is asymmetry an issue? If asymmetry is an issue and you're saying yes, then looking at the pivot fit, you can consider either standard or dynamic, what you think would work best for that user. If no, you might think of the stay flex, again, providing more frontal anterior support. If less support is needed, you've got a non-rigid back or no real structure for a 4-point harness, then you can think about the monoflex or the chest belt. Going over here on our decision tree, we have lumbar lordosis. And again, does this need some tone management? Is asymmetry an issue? If that's yes, and do we have uncontrolled movement towards flexion? If that's yes, I'm looking at the dynamic pivot fit. If no, I'm looking at the standard pivot fit. If asymmetry is not an issue, I've got no, then I'm going to consider the stay flex. So there's not, there's not just these solid reasons. Now I'm going to use a stay flex. Now I'm going to use a pivot fit. But this is just a guide to kind of help you think through what are the factors that would make me think of one versus the other. And then over here, this lack of postural stability, a chest belt, the monoflex, or the standard chest belt. I tend to prefer the monoflex. It's just more comfortable because of the padding, because it's got a little bit of a dynamic factor to it. Then that's what I'm going to look at. Also on this trunk extension and lordosis, I'm sorry, but your pictures are right over this part of the slide on my screen. So I was forgetting that you can use stay flex or monoflex or the chest belt again for lordosis, depending on if you don't need tone management. So step 4, after you figured all that out, then you would choose any additional products, features that you need. Do I need, if I need a stay flex, do I need a narrow to fit a woman? Do I want it with a zipper or without a zipper? Thinking about the pivot fit, do I need dynamic or not? Measure the user. If we're looking at the shoulder harness, measure deltoid to deltoid, and then use the Bodypoint sizing chart to figure out what size will work the best. With the monoflex and the chest strap, there's you're measuring a circumference kind of measurement, and you can check the sizing charts, the Bodypoint sizing charts for that to get the appropriate fit. And then you find the part number. You choose the infittings. Do you want flat mount? Do you want cinch mount? And then you find out what part number pertains to all those features, and then you order the product from Allied Medical. So all of this particular presentation is based off something we have, a small little publication called the Anterior Trunk Support User's Guide. This can be found on Bodypoint's website. You can also get hardbound copies that Allied Medical, I'm sure, can get for you, or you can download the file and print it yourself in a PDF form. But this gives you all the information that we went through today. And also, if you have any other questions, I would urge you to go to Bodypoint's website. There are all kinds of educational presentations. So are there any questions? I feel like I just ran through this so fast, so please let me know if we need to go back and look at something more in depth.
Questions from anyone? Feel free to either type them in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask them directly.
I'll say it's been.
No, well, I think that's us then. Thank you so much, Kathleen, for running both of these sessions. I know the information you have provided is invaluable for those who have joined the sessions or watched the recordings afterwards. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, and hope you have a lovely rest of your week. Thank you everyone for joining us. And like I said, you're welcome to email us if you have any questions, and we can get those answers sorted for you. And we will also be sending out a follow-up email with all the information that we covered today.
And you can email me directly as well. Again, it's I wish I could be with you in person, but I'm only an email away. So my cat is saying goodbye too, since he had to join us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.